Reggie, the quote is this from Xinhua, that China is, quote, abandoning its decades-long one-child policy, end quote. I've read your article. That's propaganda. Explain, please.
Well, yeah, it's actually really frustrating, John, because what they've done is this is just the most recent in a long line of adjustments. So decades ago, they said that if you're in the countryside and your first child is a girl, you can have a second child. So they had a de facto two-child policy, and through a variety of measures, just last year they said if only one member of a couple is an only child, they can have a second child. Now they say everyone can have a second child. I'm very happy for the families who can have their second child, but what people need to understand is that this is not the end of coercive birth control or population control in China. They are still going to be forcibly aborting people if they do not have a birth permit for that first child and for that second child. They are still going to forcibly abort third children. They're still going to forcibly abort even first children if the person is not married. They're still going to be carrying out forced sterilizations. They're still going to be carrying out forced contraception. The entire infrastructure of coercion and surveillance of women is going to be left firmly in place under the two-child policy, just as it was under the one-child policy. So we can't give up fighting for these women.
Reggie, when we look at this, essentially the Communist Party has retained the mechanism of intrusion into a couple's life. And essentially what they're doing is trying to regulate some of the most private things that a man and woman can decide upon. It seems to me that essentially, yeah, this is an improvement, as you point out, but in the scheme of things, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that the government still tries to regulate people. It still requires birth permits for first children and second children. And it seems to me that this is not a story that people are talking about, because it is the coercion and the intrusion that is the story, not just the limitation of one child.
That's right, Gordon. I mean, they just moved the limitation from one child to two children, but the government is still regulating what happens between the sheets. Okay, the government is still in the bedroom of the Chinese people, and not only in the bedroom, but in the very wombs of the women, declaring life or death over the beating heart in there.
And the thing that it's not going to stop is we're still going to see the forced trafficking of women, basically kidnapping of women in surrounding countries that are then smuggled into China and then sold to men in the so-called bachelor villages and then resold to other men. So all of this is going to continue, and the world is probably going to look away.
They're going to look away because of the propaganda, because the Chinese Communist Party announced this as an abolition of the one-child policy, which it is not, and because the mainstream media just trumpeted that as well. So listeners, understand, coercive population control in China is continuing under the two-child policy, just as it did under the one-child policy, and we can't let up the heat on it.